Hi, I'm Hannah. Welcome to Theology Therapist. This is the channel where we talk about all things spirituality and mental health. So welcome. Remember, before we get started, to press the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you can get updates on all weekly new videos. Today we are going to talk about how to set boundaries with toxic people without you feeling guilty. So let's get started. So first, let's talk about what a boundary is and what it is not. So a boundary is not an ultimatum. Like a lot of people, before they're comfortable with setting a boundary, they feel like it's giving an ultimatum, and it's really not that. A boundary is understanding where your kind of safety lies, where your comfort level lies, what's important to you lies, and it's like kind of building a fence there. I really think about boundaries like fences, not walls, fences. And a boundary is saying, for example, if communication is important to me in friendships and someone isn't a good communicator, then I'm gonna have a boundary around that, right? Like at some point, if I text them and they don't respond back, or they respond back like days later, I'm going to have a boundary around that, and I'm gonna probably choose whether or not that's a relationship that I want to cultivate, because it doesn't feel good to me to know that communication is a priority, and it doesn't feel good to me to be in a relationship where it's not a priority to the other person. And so a boundary is really saying, this is where a fence is, and we can't cross this fence. The reason why I like the metaphor of a fence is because they are value neutral, and boundaries are value neutral. Whenever, before we are comfortable setting a boundary, usually we have really big feelings about boundaries and about whether it's okay, whether people will think that it's okay that we have those or not. And boundaries are value neutral. They are what they are. It's that you saying that I need this to be in the relationship in order to feel safe, at ease, happy, whatever. And so given that, it's it's not an ultimatum. It's not saying do this or else. The difference between a boundary and an ultimatum is that an ultimatum places the responsibility of action on the other person, whereas the boundary places the responsibility of action on you. Even though in practice it might work a little bit like that, it's not about the other person necessarily. In my example, it's not about me being mad or me trying to change the other person and saying you text me back or else. No, I'm just going to decide that I know, this is very important to me. This is something that I need in a relationship, in a friendship, to feel good. And if it's not there, then I need to have a boundary there. That means I need to change something, not the other person. That's the difference between an ultimatum. So with a boundary, you and having it, you are responsible for acting. So in my case, in my example, I would be responsible for then either reaching out to the person and saying I'm just not really feeling this at this point in time, or hey, it was really nice to meet you, or just letting it kind of fade away, right? But it's the responsibility of that is on me. It's not on me placing that on the other person. Why should you have a boundary? Why should you place boundaries? Well, exactly for the reasons that I've said. It's because boundaries actually allow you to exist in relationships in a way that feels safe, that lets you feel at ease and lets you feel welcome. So without those, it's going to be really hard for you to cultivate relationships that are authentic, that prioritize you. It's going to be really hard to cultivate relationships that really are supportive of you or good for you. So when you're setting a boundary, for example, during COVID, it was something that I didn't want to talk about. It just was too much for me. And even sometimes still now, I don't want to talk about it. It's no thanks. Without getting into that, something with my mom really, like, she was like into it and she just wanted to talk about it, right? And so we have had this conversation so many times where I have said, like, we're on the phone and I'm like, Mom, I know that you really want to talk about this. This is important to you, but I can't talk about this. And so I'm happy to talk about anything else, but I can't talk about this. And she'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then like right back into like the exact same thing she was saying. And so I have to stop and say, I'm sorry, but I can't talk about this. And so I'm gonna have to go. That is an exact conversation that we've had. Or over text message. And same thing, talk about COVID. And I'll say, hey, look, I just told you that I can't talk about this. So how about the Spurs? I'm from San Antonio. And so like, it's a really easy, neutral topic, right? Like those are a couple of ways, an exact conversation that did happen as well. And like, those are easy ways to have a boundary about something kind of like not so emotional, not so big, right? But just something simple, but important without it being like a huge deal. Those are a couple of examples about ways to have a boundary. You could also, you know, I don't know, if you go home and your family is still religious and they ask you to pray, right? Like one way to have a boundary around that, if you would prefer not to, is to say, I'd rather not, but I'm happy to say what I'm very thankful for. Or to say, not this time, thanks for, like, I appreciate you asking, right? Like there are lots of really creative ways to have a boundary without actually being mean. If these are people that you love in your life, you probably don't want to be mean either. I'll just be really honest that boundaries aren't fun. They're not like super easy in the beginning. People don't love them, you know, like people don't love to come up against boundary. Thinking about my metaphor of the fence, people don't actually like to like run into a fence, but it's still there. And at some point, they're gonna learn that that fence exists, that fence is there, and they're gonna like, if they're like sort of, I don't want to say if they're smart, but like that's what's coming to mind. They're gonna learn that that fence exists and stop running into it. You know what I mean? Like that's like human, not even human behavior. That's just like normal. Like that's just behavior that we can expect. So at some point, even though boundaries are hard, even though that people don't like them, like I just like set your expectations because they're probably gonna have big reactions about you having a boundary there. Is what it is, better or worse. Even though that's the case, I just like set your expectations, know that, and then plan for that, because their big reaction, one, is not your responsibility, and two, doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a fence there or that there shouldn't be a boundary there. I hope this is helpful. I actually really like talking about boundaries because I don't remember where this idea of the fence came from for me, but whenever I started to like really learn and know very deeply that boundaries are value neutral, like it's not like this is a bad thing that I'm doing to you, or this is something terrible being done to me, but that it just like something that is, got better. It got easier. It got a lot easier to do it because it was like, gosh, I know this sucks right now, but at some point, like, it's not gonna suck. That's all I have for today. Let me know in the comments, like what you've tried with boundaries, what's worked, what hasn't worked. If you try any of these, like if you like this metaphor of the fence, or if you have a different or like a better one that you like, always looking for a good metaphor. So let me know. I want to keep you updated that I'm going to have a course launching at the end of the summer, so end of August, beginning of September, called Making Peace with Your Religious Past, all about regulating your nervous system so that you can kick the fear of hell to the curb, so that you can cultivate satisfying relationships, so aka we will be talking about boundaries, and so that you can engage in spirituality in a way that isn't triggering. If you are interested in joining the waitlist, you can find a link to do that in the description below. I'm linking a video here that I think that you are really going to like, all about boundaries. It was great to see you today. I'll see you next time. Be well.